On my birthday, I walked into the seven-star hotel wearing my faded jeans. My boyfriend, Lou, publicly slammed a bank card onto my face. "Take it and get lost," he sneered. "A gold digger like you is only fit for a bowl of spicy hot pot at the place next door." The surrounding guests burst into laughter, eager to see me humiliated. I bent down, picked up the card, and gently snapped it in half. "Funny enough," I said, "this hotel is mine." Behind me, 100 executives bowed in unison. "Welcome, CEO Shen, to your inspection." As Lin's face turned ashen, I held up a black card. "The American conglomerate you desperately begged for funding from last year? Its founder's last name is Shen. By the way, your company's largest shareholder seems to have just changed." His phone rang, and the board of directors announced his immediate dismissal from his CEO position. Today was my 24th birthday. The sky was a dull gray, like a dirty rag barely covering the city. I was walking alone down the gleaming corridor leading to the Platinum 7-star, dressed in my faded jeans, their edges already frayed, paired with a simple, almost shabby, plain white t-shirt. Underfoot, natural stone slabs, as costly as gold, paved the way. Around me, elegantly dressed men and women, their perfumes wafting through the air, mingled. My appearance was like an incongruous drop of ink splattered onto a meticulously painted canvas of luxury. The gazes cast my way were laced with undisguised surprise, scrutiny, and a hint of disdain. I could feel their stares, like fine needles, pricking my back and the side of my face. But I just kept my head slightly bowed, my gaze fixed on the polished floor, so reflective it mirrored my silhouette, walking step by step towards the enormous, flower-adorned archway. Beyond the archway was the birthday banquet Lou was hosting for me. Or rather, what he thought it was, a birthday banquet where I needed his charity and his presence to make an impression. Wah. Iter stopped me, polite yet distant. "Miss, do you have an invitation?" His gaze swept over my outfit, which probably cost no more than a couple of $100 combined, a professional skepticism in his eyes. I looked up, about to speak, when a familiar voice, tinged with impatience and deliberately raised, called out, "Let her in. She's my guest." Lou walked over. Today, he was wearing a perfectly tailored dark gray haute couture suit, his wristwatch glinting with a cold metallic sheen under the lights. He was strikingly handsome, with deep-set eyes and a tall nose, the kind of good looks that made people turn their heads on the street. But at this moment, the smirk playing on his lips, tinged with condescending charity, marred that handsomeness. He cast an appraising glance at me from head to toe, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly before smoothing out again, as if he couldn't be bothered with such trivial matters. He reached out and lightly put an arm around my shoulder, a gesture that seemed intimate, but his fingertips carried an undeniable force, half coaxing, half pushing me into the banquet hall. "Xiao, how many times have I told you to dress properly for occasions like this?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the few people around us, who were openly listening in, to hear. "It's not like you can't afford better. Why always look so shabby?" My heart felt a small, sharp pang, as if something had just twisted it. But I said nothing, simply letting him lead me towards the center of the hall. Crystal chandeliers poured light down, and melodious violin music flowed through the air. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's most bustling nightscape unfolded. Gowns rustled, jewels sparkled, and glasses clinked. This was a gathering place for the top elite, the respectable birthday banquet Lou had meticulously crafted for me. Yet here I stood, like a beggar who had wandered into a palace. People constantly came over to greet Lou, but their gazes invariably drifted to me, filled with scrutiny and amusement. I heard a few stifled snickers and whispers. "Young Lou certainly has unique taste this time. I hear her family background is very ordinary. She's probably just after young Lou's money." Lou seemed to revel in these gazes. While he chatted cheerfully with others, he would occasionally correct my behavior in a tone that feigned affection but was actually humiliating. "Xiao, that's not how you hold a wine glass. Caviar like this is meant to be paired with champagne. Why are you drinking juice?" Each correction elicited a knowing round of suppressed chuckles. I felt like a puppet on strings, struggling to maintain a stiff curve on my lips, feeling as if the skin on my face might crack. My palms were damp with a fine sweat, and my nails dug deep into my flesh, bringing a sharp pain that barely managed to quell the bitter surge in my heart. What was I gaining from him? This favor that demanded constant subservience? This superiority built upon trampling my self-respect? Perhaps, it was time to end things. Midway through the banquet, the atmosphere was at its peak. Lou was surrounded by a crowd, in high spirits. He seemed particularly excited today, having had quite a bit to drink, a flush of tipsy red staining the corners of his eyes. Just then, a woman in a pink slip dress with exquisite makeup, swaying her hips, walked over. She was one of Lou's distant cousins, who had always disliked me. In her hand, she held a jewelry box that clearly looked expensive, and in a sugary sweet voice, she said to Lou, "Cousin, look at the birthday gift I prepared for Sister Juan. It's the latest bracelet from Tiffany Company. To you, cousin, it might not be much, but I'm sure it's the kind of luxury Sister Juan usually wouldn't dare to buy." She deliberately emphasized the words "wouldn't dare to buy," and the surroundings instantly fell silent, all eyes fixed on me, as if waiting for a show. Lou took the jewelry box, barely glancing at it, and casually shoved it into my hand. Then, in an almost flippant tone, he announced to the entire hall, "My Juan is just too frugal, always reluctant to spend money. But it's alright, now that she's with me, she won't have to live so meagerly anymore." His voice, amplified by the microphone, reached every corner of the banquet hall. "Today, I'll take this opportunity to make a gesture as well." As he spoke, he pulled a golden bank card from his inner suit pocket, twirling it between his fingers. Then, before I could even react, he flicked his wrist. The card, with a contemptuous arc, landed squarely on my face. Its hard edge scraped my skin, bringing a sharp sting. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. The entire banquet hall fell into absolute silence, as if someone had pressed pause on the background music. Everyone held their breath, their eyes wide, watching the scene in disbelief. Lou wore the smile of a benefactor, but his eyes were full of undisguised contempt and annoyance. He looked down at me, his voice clear and cold, every word like a poisoned icicle. "Shen, take it and get lost. Spend it wisely, it's enough for a gold digger like you to live lavishly for a while." He paused, as if deliberately to deepen the humiliation, then raised a hand and pointed towards a brightly lit, bustling little eatery on the opposite street corner, scoffing, "But personally, I think you're only destined to eat a bowl of spicy hot pot next door." Then, a boom shattered the brief silence. Suppressed roars of laughter and whispers surged like a tide. Those gazes, previously somewhat veiled, now transformed into outright mockery and gleeful anticipation. Flashlights flickered, and some even raised their phones. I stood my ground, the spot where the card hit my face burning. But what hurt more was my heart, clutched tightly by an invisible hand, almost suffocating me. I looked at Lou, this man I had loved for 2 years, believing all along that high arrogance was merely a playboy's quirk, and that perhaps a shred of warmth still resided in his heart. Now, under the brilliant crystal chandeliers, his face appeared so foreign, so ugly. It turned out that in his eyes, all my independence, persistence, and disdain for vanity were merely a pretense of purity, a bargaining chip to be played. All my love and effort ultimately boiled down to 3 words: gold digger. Fine. Yes, this is for the best. Under everyone's gaze, amidst a sea of schadenfreude, I slowly, deliberately, bent down. My dress hem brushed the polished, cold floor. I didn't look at anyone's expression, but extended my slender, yet remarkably steady fingers, and picked up the golden card that had fallen to the floor, a symbol of my humiliation. The moment my fingertips touched the card, I could feel the surrounding laughter grow louder, carrying the implication of "just as we thought, she picked it up after all." The mocking curve on Lou's lips widened, as if to say, "See? I knew it." I straightened up, meeting his contemptuous gaze calmly. Then, under everyone's stunned gaze, I gripped the card between 2 fingers and gave a light squeeze. Snap. The crisp snapping sound echoed sharply in the suddenly silent hall. The golden card broke into 2 pieces. I casually tossed them onto the floor, as if discarding dirty trash. "Lou," I began, my voice quiet but exceptionally clear, carrying a cold authority I hadn't even realized I possessed, "you might have a few things wrong." I surveyed the frozen smiles and uncertain faces around me, and finally, my gaze returned to Lou, whose complexion had already begun to shift. "First," I said calmly, "this Platinum Hotel, it seems, is mine." The moment the words left my lips, the large doors leading from the banquet hall to the inner areas silently swung open. A procession of men and women, impeccably dressed in suits and exuding composed confidence, filed in, their steps perfectly synchronized, numbering over 100. They quickly lined up behind me, their postures respectful, their expressions solemn. The venerable, white-haired, and refined-looking elder leading them bowed slightly, his voice resounding loudly and clearly throughout the hall. "Welcome, CEO Shen, to your inspection of Platinum Group." Dead silence. If moments ago there were still whispers and stifled gasps, now, the entire Platinum banquet hall seemed to have been pulled into a vacuum. The silence was so profound you could hear a pin drop. 100 executives from Platinum Group, including the heads of core departments like hotel management, real estate, and investments, now stood uniformly behind me, like soldiers at inspection, bowing slightly with genuine deference. That single welcome, CEO Shen, to your inspection, struck like a heavy hammer against everyone's hearts, shattering the false masks worn by everyone present, especially Liu. The color drained from his face at a visible rate, shifting from the slight flush of alcohol to an ashen pallor, finally settling into an ugly, defeated gray. His eyes, once brimming with arrogance and scorn, were now wide with shock, his pupils violently constricted from extreme astonishment, the whites of his eyes streaked with blood. His lips were slightly parted, as if he wanted to speak, but no sound emerged, only his Adam's apple bobbed up and down with difficulty. He looked at me as if he were truly seeing me for the first time. No, perhaps he had never known the real me. What he knew was merely the gold-digger Shen of his own imagination, who needed his charity and coveted his money. The expressions of the surrounding guests, who had originally been waiting to see me embarrassed, were even more spectacular. Astonishment, disbelief, panic, and then rapidly shifting to obsequiousness. Their faces changed like a palette of colors. Some instinctively took a step back, as if fearing to be caught in the impending storm, others tried to force what they hoped were friendly smiles, though their grins were as stiff as plaster statues. Those who had laughed the loudest and recorded with their phones were now frantically trying to put them away, their faces as white as sheets. Lou's cousin, who had given me the Tiffany Company bracelet, was even more terrified, her face pale with fright. The wine glass in her hand slipped, falling to the ground with a crisp smash, splashing crimson wine all over her expensive dress, though she seemed oblivious to it. She simply stared at me in horror, as if I were some man-eating monster. I didn't bother to look at the reactions of those clowns. My gaze remained fixed on Liu, with a composure that was almost cruel. Surprised, Mr. Liu? I tilted my head slightly, my tone casual, yet it cut into Liu's heart like a knife. Did you think I insisted on splitting the bill because I was poor and insecure? Did you think I wore t-shirts and jeans that cost a few $dozen because I couldn't afford luxury brands? Did you think I refused your expensive gifts to feign purity or play hard to get? With each question I asked, Liu's face grew paler, his body swayed almost imperceptibly, as if he needed to lean on a nearby table to steady himself. It seems, I let out a soft laugh, a sound that was piercingly clear in the silent hall and filled with endless mockery. You truly knew nothing about me. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us, and could clearly see the fine beads of cold sweat on his temples and his slightly trembling fingers. Weren't you always curious about what my parents did? I looked him in the eyes, speaking each word distinctly. They are indeed gone. But what they left me wasn't a mess that required me to live at the mercy of others, but a multinational conglomerate probably several times larger than your entire Liu family's assets, I'd say. North Capital. Heard of it? I asked, my tone flat. Liu's pupils abruptly constricted again. KS Capital, that mysterious and formidable financial behemoth. Last year, the Liu faced severe financial issues, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Liu and his father had cast aside all dignity, leveraged every connection, and flown to North countless times, desperate to secure a life-saving investment from KS Capital. In the end, they didn't even manage to meet anyone from KS Capital's core decision-making team, only receiving a subordinated investment with stringent conditions. Yet, even that had allowed the Liu to recover and significantly solidify Liu's position within the family. It had been both the most humiliating and most fortunate experience of Liu's business career. Watching him look as if he'd been struck by lightning, the coldness in my heart intensified. From the pocket of my faded jeans, I pulled out a card. Not a credit card, not a debit card. It was a card entirely black, with subtle platinum patterns inlaid along its edges, and a simple yet ancient S embossed in its center. It didn't look particularly flashy, but a few well-informed tycoons in the room, seeing the card, immediately gasped, their eyes wide with terror. Globally Limited, the rumored pinnacle of status and wealth, the UBS Diamond Card. It was said that its holders were few and far between, each one a figure capable of stirring up storms in the global economy. I casually toyed with the black card between my fingers, as if it were an ordinary plaything. Last year, you, like a dog. Oh, I apologize, inappropriate choice of words. I apologized with a smile, though there was no warmth in my eyes. The founder of KS Capital, whom you went to such lengths, almost begging, to see last year, seems to also be named Shin. Boom. This sentence had a greater impact than all my previous words combined. Lou staggered back a step, knocking over a waiter's tray of drinks behind him. Glasses clattered and shattered, drinks splashed all over him, soaking a large patch of his expensive suit trousers, leaving him in utter disarray. But he paid no mind, simply staring fixedly at me, or rather, at the black card in my hand, his eyes filled with extreme shock, terror, and utter collapse. KS Capital's founder is named Shen? Shen is also named Shen? That mysterious, powerful, godlike controller of a financial empire was actually this very woman standing before him, whom he had dismissed as a gold digger and publicly humiliated by throwing a bank card in her face. How could this be possible? This was utterly absurd, like a nightmare. Yet, the 100 respectful executives behind me, the black card in my hand symbolizing supreme power, and my aura of standing imperiously, as if in control of everything, all cruelly hammered home the truth. This was the brutal reality. He opened his mouth, and a hoarse, wheezing sound, like a broken bellows, escaped his throat, yet he couldn't utter a single coherent syllable. His worldview, his self-important superiority of the past 2 years, shattered, crumbled, and turned to dust in that moment. I watched his lost, devastated, and on the verge of collapse appearance, feeling no ripple of emotion, only the settled coldness of resolution. I had no intention of letting him off the hook so easily. The humiliation had only just begun. I put away the black card, and in an even calmer, yet more devastating tone, dropped the final bombshell. Oh, and Mr. Liu, there's another piece of news you might not have been informed of yet. I paused, enjoying the extinction of the last glimmer of hope in his eyes, and slowly stated, that group under your name, if I'm not mistaken, its largest shareholder, seems to have just changed, moments ago. As if to confirm my words, almost simultaneously, Lou's phone in his suit pocket began to vibrate and ring frantically, like a death knell. The sharp ringing echoed through the dead-silent banquet hall, sounding particularly grating. Lou snatched out his phone as if he'd been burned. The screen flashed with the words bored. His fingers trembled so violently he could barely hold the phone, and the last trace of color drained from his face, leaving it as pale as paper. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pleading, terror, and a hint of unbelievable despair. I subtly curled my lips, revealing a cold and cruel smile. Aren't you going to answer, Mr. Liu? I said softly. Perhaps they're calling to congratulate you on being dismissed? Ring ring, ring ring, the phone continued to ring stubbornly, like a death summons, each chime pounding on Lou's crumbling nerves and piercing the hearts of everyone in the banquet hall. Everyone's gaze was fixed intently on the constantly vibrating phone in Lou's hand, as if it weren't a communication device, but a bomb about to detonate. The air was so thick it was suffocating, even the sound of swallowing was remarkably clear. Lou's fingers shook violently, his knuckles white from gripping. He looked at me, his eyes filled with immense dread and a final, desperate plea, as if asking, this isn't real, is it? You're joking, right? I met his gaze, my eyes calm and unperturbed, even holding a faint hint of pity. But this pity was harder for him to bear than direct mockery. Finally, with all his strength, he pressed the answer button, and brought the trembling phone to his ear. He didn't put it on speaker. But the banquet hall was utterly silent, so silent that the anxious, terrified, even tearful voice of a middle-aged man emanating from the phone's earpiece clearly reached the ears of those standing nearby, and then, through their horrified expressions and gasps, was conveyed to everyone in the hall. Liu. Mr. Liu. This is terrible. Something huge has happened. It was the board secretary's voice, filled with an apocalyptic panic. Just now, the group received an official letter from North KS Capital. They announced that through secondary market trades and multiple clandestine acquisitions, they now collectively hold over 51% of Lou's shares, becoming the absolute controlling shareholder. Lou's body swayed violently. His other hand gripped the nearby tabletop, his knuckles cracking from the strain. Veins bulged on his forehead, and cold sweat streamed down his temples. The voice on the other end of the line continued, laced with despair. The appointment letters for KS Capital's newly designated chairman of the board and CEO have arrived simultaneously. They announced they are effective immediately. Mr. Liu, you've been dismissed. You are no longer the CEO of Liu. The board demands that you immediately surrender all authority and undergo a departure audit. Buzz, despite the earlier premonition, when this brutal reality was starkly announced, the entire banquet hall still erupted in an uncontrollable uproar. Dismissed. Effective immediately. The group had changed hands. And the mastermind behind all of this was none other than Shen, whom Lu had just publicly humiliated and called a gold digger. She was the true owner of KS Capital, the very entity he had so desperately begged for a sliver of assistance. The reversal was too dramatic, too sudden, too much of a slap in the face. Everyone's gaze once again converged on me. But this time, there was no trace of disdain or mockery in their eyes, only boundless awe, fear, and a touch of absurdity. They looked at me as if I were a deity who had suddenly risen from the dust, holding the power of life and death over them. Lu remained in the posture of taking a call, but his entire being seemed to have been drained of its soul. The phone slipped from his powerless hand and fell with a thud onto the marble floor, its screen instantly shattering, just like his life and dignity in that moment. He stood there blankly, his eyes vacant, his face ashen, his expensive suit still stained with wine, his hair disheveled. Where was the once confident and dashing young Lu, the CEO of the group, now? He was like a beggar who had lost everything, standing on the very stage he had once used to flaunt his status and humiliate others, receiving the silent judgment and scorn of the entire room. I slowly walked up to him, my heels clicking crisply on the polished floor with each step, each one like a stomp on his heart. I bent down, picked up the 2 broken pieces of the golden card from the floor, and dangled them before his eyes. Lu, I said, my voice soft yet imbued with immense power, you just said the money on this card was enough for a gold digger like me to live lavishly for a while? I chuckled softly, and tossed the broken card into a nearby trash can. Now, what do you think? I asked, raising my eyes and sweeping my gaze across this magnificent 7-star hotel, across the stunned and silent guests, finally letting it settle back on his ashen face, asking each word distinctly, between the two of us, who truly looks more like a gold digger? Who is more pathetic? Lu suddenly looked up, his bloodshot eyes like those of a dying beast, filled with final defiance and madness, as he hoarsely roared, why? Shen, why are you doing this to me? You're clearly so rich. Why did you pretend to be poor? Why did you hide it from me? Were you calculating against me from the very beginning? Against our Lu family? His questions were laced with a laughable sense of righteous indignation, as if he were the victim of an enormous injustice. I calmly watched his hysterical outburst, my heart cold and unfeeling. Hiding it from you? I repeated, a mocking curve playing on my lips. Lu, in the 2 years we were together, I told you countless times that I didn't care about money. I wanted a pure relationship. I refused your expensive gifts and stuck to my own spending habits. Wasn't that obvious enough? It was you. I pressed closer, my gaze sharp as a knife, cutting straight to his core. It was you who were blinded by your own arrogance and prejudice. You stubbornly believed that a woman who didn't covet your money must be poor and insecure, playing hard to get. You reveled in the thrill of crushing others with money and offering charity. You never truly tried to understand the real me, to respect my choices and values. You never loved Shen, the person. My voice was decisive. What you loved was the Cinderella in your imagination who needed your rescue, the backdrop you used to highlight your own superiority. When this backdrop suddenly became a princess you couldn't reach, even a queen who could control your fate, you couldn't stand it, felt deceived, felt plotted against? I shook my head, my eyes filled with sorrowful disdain. Lu, I was never the one calculating against you. It was your own vanity, narrow-mindedness, and stupidity. These words, like a final thunderbolt, completely extinguished the last light in Lu's eyes. He stumbled backward, completely lost, muttering, no, it's not like that. But no one cared about his justifications anymore. I turned away, not sparing him another glance. Facing the Platinum Group executives respectfully waiting behind me, especially the elder who led them, Mr. James, president of Platinum Asia, I gave a slight nod. James immediately understood, stepped forward, and announced in a calm voice, distinguished guests, some unpleasant interruptions have occurred tonight, spoiling your enjoyment. CEO Shen has instructed that all guest expenses tonight will be fully covered by Platinum Group, as a token of our apology. At the same time, the banquet concludes here. Please depart in an orderly fashion. Security, please assist Mr. Lu in leaving. The word assist was spoken with particular emphasis and deeper meaning. Immediately, several tall, solemn-faced security guards stepped forward, politely but firmly escorting the distraught Lu away. He offered no resistance, nor did he have the strength to, resembling a zombie as he was half-helped, half-dragged from the execution ground he had meticulously prepared for himself. The guests be gone to filter out, their expressions complex, amidst an eerie silence. No one dared to speak loudly. As they passed me, they instinctively lowered their heads or offered exceedingly deferential smiles. I stood my ground, gazing at the glittering urban nightscape outside the window. Reflected in the glass was my clear silhouette, still dressed in my faded jeans and t-shirt, but my entire aura had profoundly changed. My phone vibrated. I took it out and glanced at it. It was a message from my assistant, CEO Shen. The announcement regarding Lu's equity change and personnel appointments has been officially released. Media arrangements are all in order. I put away my phone, my face expressionless. The game had only just begun. Lu, did you think this was the end? The humiliation you inflicted upon me, all your scorn and contempt for the identity of Shen, I will claim back, little by little, with interest. This 7-star hotel, after tonight, will mark the beginning of your shattered elite dreams and your descent into ridicule. And I, Shen, will reclaim everything that is mine, including the dignity you so underestimated. The guests almost fled from the Platinum Hotel. The banquet hall, once a symbol of ultimate luxury and delight, was now left with only emptiness and dead silence. The air still seemed to carry the cloying sweetness of champagne, the aroma of food, and an invisible, intangible, yet suffocating, residual power named authority. The crystal chandeliers still sparkled brilliantly, illuminating the reflective marble floor, where scattered fragments of overturned wine glasses lay from the guests' hasty departure, along with the 2 pieces of the golden bank card I had broken, lying like 2 dead insects beside the trash can, ignored by all. The well-trained waiters began to clear up the remnants, moving swiftly and discreetly, careful not to make much noise, and not daring to look up at me, standing by the window. Their eyes were full of awe, along with a faint sense of the storm that was about to sweep the entire city. Mr. James stood respectfully a short distance behind me, maintaining an appropriate distance, ready to take orders at any moment, yet careful not to disturb my thoughts. James, I said, my voice sounding rather cool in the empty hall. CEO Shen, your command. He immediately stepped half a pace forward and bowed slightly. Regarding tonight's events, I do not wish to hear any rumors or gossip outside that could negatively impact the Platinum brand image. My gaze remained on the bustling traffic outside, my tone flat but carrying an undeniable resolve. Issue a gag order internally. As for the guests, you know what to do. Understood, CEO Shen, James said, comprehending immediately. We will handle the follow-up media relations and guest appeasement to ensure the narrative is favorable to us. As for those who filmed inappropriate content with their phones, someone will communicate with them to ensure all video evidence is completely deleted. I nodded. The power of capital is sometimes that simple and direct. Problems that can be solved with money are never truly problems. And after tonight, I doubted anyone in this city's upper echelon would be foolish enough to challenge the authority of KS Capital and Platinum Group. As for the Lu, I paused. The announcement has been issued, and our team has moved in, currently taking over relevant documentation to ensure a smooth transition, James reported, his tone steady. Lu has been escorted out of the hotel. According to reports from below, his condition is very poor. He seems to have collapsed. Collapsed? I let out a soft scoff. Collapsed already? He was far too fragile. For 2 years, his seemingly unintentional flaunting, his condescending guidance, his remarks at friends' gatherings hinting that I was marrying up, and tonight's ultimate humiliation. All he had relied on was his identity as young Lu and the wealth he believed was enough to crush me. When this seemingly solid shell was mercilessly stripped away, revealing his inner emptiness and pathetic nature, collapse was an inevitable outcome. But this was far from enough. What I wanted wasn't his momentary collapse. What I wanted was for him to live forever under the shadow of this day, for him to recall tonight's disgrace every time he tried to make a comeback, for him to truly understand what genuine despair felt like. Have someone keep an eye on him, I instructed flatly. Also, find out what other investments he made using Lu's resources, and what connections he has. What I want is a complete blockade. A flicker of understanding passed through James's eyes, and he respectfully replied, yes, CEO Shen. When cutting weeds, remove the roots. When striking a snake, strike at its most vital point. Since I've made my move, I won't give my opponent any chance to breathe. This is the law of the business world, and it is also my, Shen's, style of doing things. My low profile and poverty of the past 2 years were merely because I was tired of my family's prestige, wanting to experience an ordinary life and find a pure, untainted love. Unfortunately, reality slapped me hard. Since the mask of an ordinary person had been torn off, then it was time for Shin's true face to be revealed. I turned, ready to leave this nauseating place. CEO Shin, your car is ready, James quickly said. I waved my hand. No need, I'll walk. Under the astonished gazes of James and the other executives, I, still dressed in my faded jeans and t-shirt, an outfit utterly out of place in this seven-star hotel, walked alone out of the resplendent hotel entrance. The night breeze was cool against my face, carrying away a trace of the stale air from the banquet hall. The city's neon lights still flickered, and traffic flowed like a river. I walked slowly along the sidewalk, indistinguishable from the bustling pedestrians around me. No one knew that this girl, who okayed like a fresh college graduate, had just personally directed and witnessed the prelude to the downfall of a prominent family within the luxurious palace behind her. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was a video call request. I glanced at the screen, and the icy expression on my face softened slightly, revealing a genuine, warm smile. I answered. On the screen appeared the face of a kind and energetic old man, with a classically elegant study as his backdrop. Grandpa, I said softly. Shao. Grandpa's voice was hearty, laced with concern. How was your birthday? I hear you caused quite a stir over there. I replied blandly, offering no further explanation. Just handled a bit of private business. And while I was at it, cleaned house a bit. Grandpa smiled from the other end of the screen, his eyes sharp. That boy? I always said he had a twisted mind, too narrow-minded. He was never good enough for you. But you insisted on experiencing ordinary love. Now that you've hit rock bottom, do you finally see sense? I murmured a soft offering no rebuttal. Grandpa's judgment of people had always been exceptionally sharp. When I was determined to be with Lou, he explicitly voiced his disapproval, yet he respected my choice, simply saying, go ahead, a fall might do you good. Then you'll understand why I wanted you to find someone with a matching background. Matching background didn't just refer to wealth, it was about perspective, vision, and upbringing. It's good that you've come to your senses, Grandpa said, his tone relieved. A daughter of the Shin family doesn't need to tolerate any grievances. You can do whatever you want, the legacy your father and I built is enough for you to make your mark. If you need any support from the family, just say the word. Thank you, Grandpa, but I can handle it myself, I replied, my voice firm. Since I had decided to stop hiding, I would use my own methods to clean up the mess of this farce and show retain people who Shin truly was. Alright, just say if you need anything, Grandpa nodded, adding a few more reminders about my health before ending the call. Putting away my phone, I took a deep breath of the cool night air. The reveal of my identity was just the beginning. Moving forward, I would likely face not only Lou's collapse and the Liu family's retaliation, if they still had the capacity, but also shifts in the entire city's business landscape, and countless eyes, some curious, some wary, some trying to cling to me. But none of that mattered anymore. From tonight on, I was no longer the Cinderella Shin, who had to carefully protect her lover's fragile ego. I was the heir to KS Capital, the effective controller of Puri, CEO Shin, the one who could easily determine the rise and fall of an elite family. I walked to the Malatang restaurant at the street corner, the one Lou had once said was only fit for me to eat at. The shop was brightly lit, steaming, and exuded an inviting spicy aroma. Many young people, just off work, sat together, eating Malatang and chatting, creating a lively and authentic atmosphere. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The female owner greeted me warmly. Welcome, beautiful. How many? What can I get you? I found a corner table and sat down, smiling as I looked at the simple menu on the wall. One bowl of Malatang, mild spicy, with extra greens. Coming right up. Soon, a steaming bowl of Malatang, with red chili oil swirling, was placed before me. I picked up my chopsticks and slowly began to eat. It tasted wonderful, a warmth that felt authentic and grounded in everyday life. This was the flavor I truly loved. As for Lou and his superficial world, I lowered my head, watching the rising steam from my bowl, my gaze gradually turning cold and sharp. The game continued. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the Italian custom carpet in the penthouse suite of the Puri. Is. Tued by the window, overlooking the gradually awakening city below. The previous night's chaos had already been meticulously cleaned up by a well-trained team, as if the dramatic birthday banquet had never happened. But I knew a storm was brewing, spreading with astonishing speed. On the coffee table lay several freshly printed financial newspapers and gossip tabloids from that morning. Without even opening them, I could guess what the headlines would be. Indeed, my assistant, Emily, walked in light-footed, carrying a tablet. She was dressed in a smart professional suit, her expression respectful with a hint of excitement. "Good morning, Ms. Shen. Here's today's media briefing and urgent documents for your review." I turned, taking the tablet. The screen displayed meticulously organized screenshots of major media front pages and trending topics online. Stunning. Lu changes, mysterious KS capital. Birthday turns into a trap? Lu's young publicly, allegedly mysterious tycoon. Uncovering Yuan, low-profile dates in secret, strikes powerfully public. Live from the 7 Hotel, card up, card, 100 bowing, even wouldn't dare this. Each headline was more sensational than the last, accompanied by photos mostly showing distant views of the banquet hall from last night. Internal photography was prohibited, so angles were limited, or archived photos of Lu and me. My photo was taken 2 years ago, right after college, comically naive, and comparison logos of KS Capital and the Lu. Online discussions had erupted. 5 or 6 of the top 10 trending topics on Weibo were related to last night's events. Hashtag Shenwan Real Identity Hashtag Lulin ousted Hashtag KS Capital Hashtag 7-star Hotel Reversal Hashtag, all followed by a prominent red hot. The comment section was spectacular. "Oh my god. Is this some wish fulfillment web novel plot come to life? Miss Wan is so cool. Yesterday I was mocking her as a gold digger. Today I realize the joke was on me. How's Lu doing now? KS Capital. That's a legendary giant. The family really bit off more than they could chew this time. So Wan is the granddaughter of KS's founder. Her net worth must be in the trillions, right? Am I the only one curious about what Shin will do next? I feel like the Lu family is doomed." Public opinion was almost unilaterally on my side. On one hand, KS Capital's powerful public relations team was guiding the narrative. On the other, Lu had always been arrogant and made many enemies. His public humiliation of a woman was an egregious act in itself, naturally leading to a cascade of condemnation. Lu's stock hit its daily limit down at market open, Emily added. Market panic is spreading, and several partners have expressed their intention to re-evaluate their cooperation with the Lu. Banks are also applying pressure, demanding early loan repayments. I casually glanced at the stock trend chart. That vertically plunging green line symbolized the rapid evaporation of the Lu family's wealth. "How much market value have our holdings in Lu lost so far?" I asked. Since our hidden acquisition had an extremely low cost, even calculated at today's limit down price, our unrealized gains are still astonishing. Moreover, the massive number of sell orders at the limit down price suggests the market broadly expects multiple additional limit down days, Emily replied professionally. More importantly, we've secured controlling interest. The group's high-quality assets can soon be reorganized and divested. I nodded. The ruthlessness of the capital market lay in this. It didn't pity the weak, it only followed the strong. The collapse of the Lu family had, from this moment, entered its countdown. Also, Ms. Shen, Emily switched the screen page. Since last night, your private phone and work email have received a huge volume of emails and meeting requests. This includes several key city leaders, chairpersons of major business associations, and almost every prominent family and corporate head, all expressing their desire to meet with you. I curved my lips into a slight smile. This was reality. When you demonstrated sufficient strength, the entire world would treat you with deference. Yesterday, I might have been a Cinderella needing scrutiny. Today, I was someone they were desperate to befriend, even curry favor with. Filter them, I instructed. Decline all non-essential engagements. For the important ones, draft a list and prioritize them for me. Yes, Ms. Shen. Just then, the dedicated line in the outer suite rang. Emily went to answer it. A moment later, she covered the receiver with her hand and lowered her voice to me. "Ms. Shen, it's Lu's father, Mr. Lu. He wishes to speak with you." His tone is very anxious. Lu? The current head of the Lu family, Lu's father. The middle-aged man who, throughout my relationship with Lu, had always treated me with a subtle, underlying condescension. He finally couldn't sit still any longer. I walked to the phone, signaling Emily to connect the call. "Hello," my voice was calm and even. Immediately, Lu's voice, full of extreme anxiety and even a hint of a whimper, came through the receiver. Ms. Shen. "No, CEO Shen." "Hello, CEO Shen. It's Lu. Mr. Lu, can I help you?" My tone was distant. "CEO Shen. All the mistakes, all the wrongs, are ours, the Liu family's. It's my fault for failing to raise my son properly, for allowing that rebellious child to offend you. I apologize on behalf of our entire family. Please, show us mercy, spare the Liu family a lifeline. Liu's voice was filled with desperate pleas. As long as you let the Liu go, we'll agree to any condition. We can immediately make Liu leave the family and beg for your forgiveness. Our shares. We can also transfer them to you at a low price, just please, leave us a way to survive. Listening to his incoherent begging, my heart remained untouched. Only now did he know to beg for mercy? When Lin was acting high and mighty, wantonly humiliating me. Did his father ever once try to stop him? He probably tacitly approved, or even felt smug. Mr. Liu, I interrupted him, my voice icy. Business is business. You win some, you lose some. KS Capital's acquisition of Liu shares complies with all laws and regulations. As for Liu, I paused, my tone tinged with mockery. His apology means absolutely nothing to me. CEO Shen. Please, what will it take for you to stop? Just name your price. Liu was practically wailing. What will it take? I chuckled softly. Perhaps when Liu truly experiences what it's like to lose everything, abandoned by everyone, and having to scheme for every penny, just like the gold digger he accused me of being, even for a bowl of malatang, then, I might consider if it's time to stop. With that, I gave him no further opportunity and simply hung up. Beg for mercy? Too late. If apologies were enough, what need would there be for laws and rules? If begging could solve everything, then this world would be far too easy for villains. What I wanted was punishment, deterrence, to make everyone understand the price of crossing Shen. Emily looked at me, a hint of awe in her eyes. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened a file. Send out a notice, I told Emily. We'll have a video conference with KS Capital's Asia region senior executives this afternoon. We need to discuss the restructuring plan for the Liu's assets. The eye of the storm had formed, and my hands, which stirred the winds of change, were only just beginning to exert their power. Liu family, enjoy your final twilight. On the other side of the city, in stark contrast to the tranquil luxury of the Puri penthouse, despair permeated a cheap apartment. Liu was curled up on a creaking old sofa, still wearing the expensive, now wine-stained and wrinkled suit from last night. The room reeked of the sour stench of stale instant noodles and tobacco. Empty wine bottles and crumpled financial newspapers lay scattered on the floor. The bold black H. Liu changes, Liu ousted, were like poison-tipped needles, piercing his eyes. Arg! He violently smashed the wine bottle in his hand against the wall. Glass shards scattered, and amber liquid streamed down the grimy wall, like an ugly tear stain. 2 days. Just 48 hours had passed since that nightmarish evening, and his world had been turned upside down. His CEO position revoked, all company access frozen, his bank accounts urgently frozen by his father, reportedly to protect their meager remaining assets, and even his flashy limited edition sports car had been forcibly repossessed by creditors. His former friends, who used to call him brother and fawn over him, either didn't answer his calls or offered various excuses and awkward silences once they did, eventually just blocking him altogether. Social media was rife with mockery and people kicking him while he was down. His rivals, whom he had once disdained, were now gleefully carving up the market gaps left by the Liu's collapse. Abandoned by everyone, like monkeys scattering when the tree falls. For the first time, he truly understood the meaning of those words. But what he couldn't stand the most was Shen. The woman he once considered his plaything, someone he could easily manipulate, had transformed overnight into an existence he had to look up to, even fear. KS Capital, Puri Group, North Conglomerate. These words struck him like heavy hammers, repeatedly shattering his fragile ego. He recalled proudly telling her about the Liu's latest big project. He remembered his laughable self-satisfaction when he generously offered her jewelry and mansions, only for her to calmly refuse. He thought of the countless times he subtly hinted at her social climbing, while she merely watched him in silence, her eyes perhaps already filled with pity for a mere clown. Bleg, a coppery taste filled his throat, and he coughed violently, a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. The extreme anger, humiliation, and panic were already causing his body to sound an alarm. No. He couldn't just let it end like this. He was Liu, the young master of the Liu family. He still had a chance to turn things around. Yes, he'd find his father. His father must still have a way. The family had operated for so many years, they must still have some hidden connections and resources. Like a man grasping at a last straw, he frantically searched through a pile of clutter on the floor for his phone. The screen was cracked, but it still turned on. He tremblingly dialed the familiar number. The phone rang for a long time before it was answered, but it wasn't his father Lou's voice. It was an icy female voice. Hello? It was his father's female secretary, who had never liked him. I need my dad. Put my dad on the phone. Lou roared hoarsely. Mr. Lou is very busy right now and unavailable to take your call. The secretary's voice was businesslike and cold. Also, Mr. Lou asked me to tell you that the family is in a complete mess because of you. He wants you to lie low for a while and stop causing trouble, otherwise, the family won't be able to protect you either. Protect me? When has he ever protected me? Lou screamed, losing control. Is he trying to suck up to that bitch Shin now? I'm telling you, it's useless. She won't let us go. Mr. Lou, please watch your language. The secretary's voice grew colder. Mr. Lou is already overwhelmed with your problems. Also, the bank will be foreclosing on your apartment tomorrow. You're on your own. What? My apartment? That's my. Lou's words were cut off as the phone was hung up, leaving only a persistent dial tone. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded like a funeral dirge. Lou collapsed to the floor, the phone slipping from his hand. His last shred of hope was completely shattered. Even his father had given up on him. A burning hunger gnawed at his stomach. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything since yesterday. His wallet held only a few crumpled bills, not then enough for a decent takeaway meal. He struggled to his feet, staggering out of this moldy temporary refuge. He needed food, he needed alcohol to numb himself. The afternoon sun was harsh. Pedestrians hurried by, none giving a second glance to this disheveled man with vacant eyes. He reached a corner convenience store and, with his last money, bought the cheapest loaf of bread and a bottle of cheap liquor. As he walked out of the convenience store, he instinctively started towards the high-end Japanese restaurant across the street, a place he frequented where meals cost hundreds of dollars per person. But his steps froze. The glass window reflected his pathetic figure, and the waiters inside cast glances of wariness and disdain. He recoiled as if burned, stumbling back to the dirty street corner. Leaning against the cold wall, he tore open the dry, hard bread and mechanically swallowed it, washing it down with the pungent liquor. The coarse food scratched his throat, the cheap alcohol burned his stomach. Once the young master of the Lou family, accustomed to luxury and gourmet food, he was now reduced to gnawing on the cheapest provisions on the street. The immense disparity and humiliation nearly drove him mad. Just then, a sudden screech of tires sounded beside him. A familiar black Bentley pulled up to the curb. The car door opened, and first emerged a pair of gleaming Italian handmade leather shoes, followed by a pair of perfectly tailored trousers. Lou looked up, and his clouded eyes suddenly lit up with astonishing brilliance. It was Joe, one of his best brothers. While the Joe family wasn't as powerful as the Lou family had been in its prime, they were still an elite family. Joe must not know what happened to him yet, right? He must be here for him. He must be here to help him. Joe. Asia. Lou cried out as if he'd seen a savior, scrambling over to him and excitedly grabbing Joe's arm, stammering incoherently, "You came. I knew you'd come. Help me. I'm." Joe frowned, forcefully shaking off Lou's dirty hand. His eyes were filled with undisguised disgust and detachment. He meticulously brushed off his sleeve where Lou had touched him, as if he'd been contaminated. "Lou? What on earth happened to you?" Joe's tone was dismissive. "I'm not here for you. I'm here to pick someone up." No sooner had he spoken than a stylishly dressed, elegantly made-up girl emerged from a small art gallery next to the convenience store. She was a rising artist, recently gaining recognition in the art world, and the object of Joe's ardent pursuit. Seeing Lynn's miserable state, the girl gasped, covering her mouth, and looked at Joe. "Asia, who is this?" Joe immediately adopted a gentle and considerate expression, putting an arm around the girl's waist. He said offhandedly, "Oh, just someone I barely know. I think he used to be from the Lou family. Never mind, let's not talk about it. Unpleasant business. The car's ready, let's go. Don't want to be late for the auction tonight." Someone he barely knew. Unpleasant business. These words, like an ice pick, pierced through Lou's last defenses. He watched as Joe carefully guarded the girl's head as she got into the back seat of the Bentley, then walked around to the other side to get in himself. He never once looked at Lou again. The black Bentley sped away, exhaust fumes blowing in Lou's face. He stood frozen, still clutching half of his uneaten dry bread, like a clown abandoned by the world. Occasionally, passers-by would walk past, pointing and whispering. Look at that guy, he looks familiar? Tisk, isn't that the young master of the Liu family? How did he end up like this? Serves him right. I heard he offended someone he shouldn't have, and his family is ruined. Stay away from him, he looks unstable. The murmurs buzzed like flies, drilling into his ears. Arg! Liu clutched his head, letting out a desperate, bestial roar. He violently slammed the bread and liquor bottle in his hands the ground, then slid down the wall like a heap of mud, burying his face deep in his knees. Shame, despair, rage, fear. All these emotions gnawed at his heart like venomous snakes. He had fallen from the clouds, plunging completely into the mire. And this was just the beginning. Shen. Shen. The name, like a nightmare, was etched into his very bones. A week later, at the City Arts Center, a high-profile charity auction gala, hosted by KS Capital's Charitable Foundation, was being held there. Political and business elites, cultural celebrities, and respected social figures gathered. Flashbulbs flared continuously, and media reporters on both sides of the red carpet, armed with long lenses and flashes, vied to capture every arriving guest. This was my first formal public appearance since my identity was revealed. Its significance was extraordinary. Half an hour before the gala began, my exclusive styling team had been busy all afternoon in the Puri penthouse suite. When the final touch of makeup was complete, and I stood before the enormous floor-to-ceiling mirror, even Emily, who was used to such scenes, showed a flicker of awe in her eyes. I hadn't chosen an overly dramatic or grand gown. Instead, I opted for an early autumn haute couture piece, a minimalist deep-sea blue silk satin gown. With no superfluous embellishments, its flowing lines and the luster of the premium fabric alone created an air of cool elegance and nobility. Around my neck, I wore only a small, exquisite diamond solitaire necklace, a keepsake from my mother, imbued with deep meaning. My makeup was light, highlighting my naturally delicate features, and my long hair was loosely swept up, with a few strands left to frame my face. The overall impression was one of composed authority and control, yet with the lightness befitting my age. Ms. Shen, it's almost time, Emily reminded me softly. I nodded, picked up an equally simple silver clutch, and walked out of the suite. The stretch limousine silently glided to the entrance of the art center. As the car door opened and I stepped onto the red carpet in my custom Jimmy heels, a momentary hush fell over the usually bustling scene. All eyes, all cameras, instantly focused on me. Surprise, admiration, awe, scrutiny. A myriad of complex emotions surged from all directions. I slightly lifted my chin, a perfectly poised, distant yet polite smile on my face, and, flanked by KS Capital executives, I walked calmly towards the signing board. Ms. Shen. Over here. Miss, what are your plans for the future of the Liu? Ms. Shen, what is the purpose of holding this charity gala? Reporters frantically pressed their shutters, questions hurled one after another. I didn't answer any of them, merely cooperated for a few photos, then, escorted by security, gracefully entered the banquet hall. Inside the hall, it was a scene of lavish attire and clinking glasses. My appearance again caused a considerable stir. People who had been conversing in small groups stopped their conversations, their gazes following me. Continuously, people came forward attempting to greet me or hand me business cards, but they were politely intercepted by my well-trained assistants and bodyguards. My destination was clear, the head table at the front of the banquet hall. However, just as I was about to reach the head table, the corner of my eye caught a familiar yet disheveled figure. In a relatively secluded corner of the banquet hall, near the restroom corridor, stood Liu. He had clearly gone to some effort to dress up, trying to cling to his last shred of dignity. His suit was old but ironed, though on his now slightly hunched frame, it looked empty and ill-fitting. He held a glass of champagne, but his eyes were like those of a startled rabbit, looking around nervously and anxiously, searching for someone to talk to. But no one paid him any mind. Those who once flattered him now either pretended not to see him, or, when he attempted to approach, immediately turned to chat animatedly with someone else, leaving him awkwardly standing alone. He even tried to strike up a conversation with a nouveau riche businessman from the construction materials industry, someone he would have never looked at before. The man merely offered a forced, insincere reply before excusing himself. The harsh realities of human nature were laid bare in his predicament. He seemed to feel my gaze and abruptly turned his head. Our eyes met. His face instantly turned ashen, and the hand holding the champagne glass trembled violently, sloshing wine over the rim. His eyes were filled with extreme fear, humiliation, and a desperate, servile plea that even he wouldn't admit to. He parted his lips, as if wanting to say something, but ultimately no sound escaped. He instinctively took a step back, as though I were some monstrous threat. I calmly averted my gaze, as if I had merely glanced at an insignificant ornament. My face was devoid of expression as I continued towards my seat. This deliberate oversight humiliated him 100 times more than direct ridicule or insult. Once seated, the gala officially began. The host's enthusiastic opening, the speeches from important guests, I politely listened and applauded. My attention, however, was more focused on the upcoming auction segment. There were several good antiques and artworks tonight, and as the host, KS Capital needed to set a good example. The auction proceeded smoothly, with spirited bidding. When I successfully bid on a contemporary painting, at 3 times the starting price, to support art education for children in remote areas, the entire hall erupted in warm applause. This was a display of power, and a statement. Midway through the gala, the free-mingling session began. I rose, preparing for brief discussions with several important individuals I had prearranged to meet. Just a few steps from the head table, a figure stumbled and blocked my path. It was Lou. He had found courage from somewhere, perhaps the stimulation of alcohol, perhaps the desperation of having nothing left to lose, that led him to such an irrational act. His face was flushed, his breath heavy with alcohol, and his eyes were unfocused and wild, staring intently at me. Shen. Shen. His voice was hoarse, laced with the desperation of someone with nothing left to lose. Haven't you done enough? This shout instantly drew everyone's attention. Conversation ceased abruptly, and the music happened to be transitioning, causing the entire banquet hall's gaze to once again fixate on us both. Security immediately moved forward, but I subtly raised my hand, stopping them. I wanted to hear what else he had to say. Seeing that I didn't immediately have him dragged away, Lou seemed to gain a shred of encouragement, or rather, the madness of giving up completely. He edged closer, lowering his voice, yet still loud enough for those nearby to hear. Shen, I know I was wrong before. I looked down on people. I was a scumbag. He spoke rapidly, with a frenzied confession. You've had your pound of flesh, you've exacted your punishment. The family is practically ruined. I've become the laughingstock of the entire city. Isn't that enough? He stared intently at me, his eyes bloodshot. What exactly do you want to stop? Do you want me to kneel and beg you? Huh? With that, his legs weakened, and he actually started to make a motion to kneel. The entire hall fell silent. Everyone held their breath. The young master of the Liu family kneeling in public? This would undoubtedly be tomorrow's sensational headline. However, the instant his knees were about to touch the floor, I spoke. My voice was low, yet clear and icy, carrying an undeniable authority. Lou, I said, even if you kneel, it won't change any facts. His movement froze in midair, neither kneeling nor standing, looking utterly ridiculous. I looked at him, my eyes devoid of emotion, only complete coldness and detachment. Your apology is worthless to me, I enunciated each word, my voice carrying across the silent banquet hall. Your downfall is your own doing. Your begging will only make you seem more pitiful. Furthermore, I leaned slightly closer, speaking in a volume only audible to us both, yet with a power capable of shattering his last defenses. Allow me to remind you that the dry cleaning bill for that suit you're wearing appears to be unpaid. Also, how exactly did you manage to get into this gala, which requires strict invitation verification? Do I need to ask security to verify? Lou's body trembled violently, the last trace of color draining from his face. He looked at me, his eyes filled with extreme terror and an unimaginable humiliation. I was mercilessly tearing apart even his last pitiful pretense. He could no longer support himself. With a thud, he collapsed to the floor, not kneeling, but utterly breaking down, like a heap of mud. I didn't spare him another glance, simply giving a nod to the security guards beside me. 2 guards immediately stepped forward, expressionlessly, almost dragging the distraught Lou out of the banquet hall. The entire process was quiet, swift, yet filled with silent, imposing power. I straightened the non-existent folds of my skirt, my face resuming its usual composed, gentle smile, and nodded slightly at the respectful gazes around me before continuing towards my original destination. The banquet hall music resumed, and people seemed to awaken from a dream, continuing their conversations and laughter. Yet everyone knew in their hearts, from tonight on, this city had changed its sky. And Lin, and the old era he represented, had thoroughly become a thing of the past, a laughingstock for idle chatter. The commotion at the charity gala was like a huge rock thrown into a calm lake, its ripples quickly spreading to every corner of the city. The next day, almost all media front pages were dominated by two stories. One was a positive report on the successful hosting of KS Capital's charity gala, praising the new head, Shen, for being young, capable, exceptionally bold, and devoted to public welfare, accompanied by elegant photos of me bidding at the auction. The other was the humiliating scene of Lu's public outburst at the gala and his eventual removal by security, with headlines that spared no mockery. Former master tantrum at gala, driven after plea, Lu completely, Shen ignores, displays demeanor. The contrast was stark. Public opinion was completely one-sided, and Lu and the Lu family behind him were firmly nailed to the pillar of shame. Forces that had once been friendly or cooperative with his family swiftly distanced themselves, fearing repercussions from the storm. The group's stock predictably hit consecutive daily limit downs, and its assets were rapidly taken over, liquidated, and reorganized by KS Capital's professional team. This once prominent business empire crumbled at a visible pace. I no longer paid attention to Lu's specific whereabouts. Emily occasionally mentioned that he seemed to have tried to find several jobs, but given his arrogant nature, lack of practical skills, and the offended Shen label, no respectable company dared to hire him. Later, I heard he had moved to the grittiest city outskirts, spending his days with alcohol, completely devolving into a dazed, aimless existence, like a homeless man needing charity to survive. Occasionally, paparazzi would capture photos of him, disheveled and downtrodden, a stark contrast to the once dashing young master of the Lu family, drawing sighs of regret and more mockery. But this no longer stirred any emotion in me. Paying too much attention to a drowning dog that once bit, but now lacked even the strength to bark, was simply a waste of my time. My life's focus had completely shifted. KS Capital's Asia headquarters office was located on the top floor of the city's core CBD, offering expansive views of the entire city. I quickly adapted to my new role, surrounded daily by countless meetings, documents, and decisions. Acquiring the Lu was just the first step. Next came integrating resources, optimizing structures, divesting non-performing assets, and injecting new blood and development directions. It was a massive and intricate undertaking, requiring immense dedication. But I reveled in it. This feeling of controlling the overall situation, of creating value with intellect and boldness, was far more fulfilling than my previous facade of ordinariness, carefully maintaining an unequal relationship. The family blood flowing through my veins seemed naturally suited for navigating the stormy seas of the business world. Grandpa would occasionally call via video chat. Seeing how quickly I settled into my new role and managed affairs methodically, his eyes were full of relief. He no longer interfered much with my decisions, only offering subtle advice gleaned from his lifelong experience and wisdom during casual chats when I encountered particularly thorny problems. During this period, I also received countless invitations, some sincere, others with ulterior motives. There were scions of old families who had once ignored me, now arriving with expensive gifts and earnestly seeking to befriend me. There were elders from powerful families trying to bind KS Capital, this massive ship, through arranged marriages, and there were also suitors simply attracted by my abilities and wealth. To all of these, I replied politely but distantly. The current me did not need any marriage alliance to consolidate my position, nor did I need a man's admiration to prove my worth. My world was vast, big enough to hold the stars and the sea, not just romantic attachments. On a bright, sunny afternoon, I had a rare half-day off and had my driver take me to a riding stable in the suburbs. It was a habit I'd developed long ago. When stress mounted, I loved to gallop on horseback, feeling the freedom of the wind whistling past my ears. Hanging into a sharp riding outfit, I chose a spirited thoroughbred. Stroking its sleek, glossy mane, I could feel the explosive power simmering beneath its muscles. I swung into the saddle, nudged its flanks, and the stallion bolted forward like an arrow released from a bow. The expansive grassland stretched out under a high, clear sky. I leaned low, feeling the perfect blend of speed and power, as if all my worries and fatigue were left far behind. Sweat soaked my hair, but my spirits soared. Just as I slowed down and let the horse walk along the edge of the field to rest, a gentle, slightly familiar voice spoke up beside me. "Miss? What a coincidence." I reined in my horse and turned my head. Not far away stood a man in a simple white shirt and khaki trousers, tall and composed, with a genuine smile. It was Gu, the eldest son of the Gu family. They were a true family of scholars, known for their integrity through generations. Though their businesses weren't as ostentatious as some other powerful families, They were deeply rooted and highly respected in both academic and political business circles. I had met him once before at an academic forum. Even then, I found his conversation sophisticated, his insights unique, and his presence very pleasant. Mr. Gu, I said, inclining my head slightly in greeting. I didn't feel much apprehension toward him. The family was famously upright in their conduct, and Gu himself had made a name for himself in architectural design based on his own merit, not as a pampered heir relying solely on his family. I never realized you were such an accomplished writer, miss, he said, smiling as he took a few steps closer. His gaze was genuinely appreciative as he looked at me and my horse. Chasing is famously spirited here at the stable. Apart from the top instructors, few can ride him so smoothly. It's just a hobby, really, I replied. I dismounted and handed the reins to a stable hand nearby. We naturally fell into step, walking side by side along the edge of the field. We chatted about horses and a recent architectural biennial. The conversation was light and pleasant. He didn't mention anything about KS capital, or the Lu. It was as if the scandal that had rocked the city had never happened. He simply treated me as an individual with shared interests, someone he could converse with as an equal. This feeling was new, and very comfortable. When we parted, he handed me a simply designed business card. It bore only his name and a studio phone number. My studio is nearby, so I come here occasionally. If you come riding again, miss, and have some free time, perhaps we could get coffee together. His invitation was natural and unforced, his eyes clear. I took the card and smiled. All right, if the opportunity arises. Watching him walk away, I gently rubbed the business card in my hand. Perhaps, in this new life, beyond my career and revenge, there could be different, promising new horizons to look forward to. But no matter what, the reins would always be in my own hands. Time flew by. More than half a year had passed since the birthday banquet scandal that had shocked the entire city. On an autumn afternoon, the sunlight was warm and gentle. I sat on the sofa in my top-floor office at KS Capital, listening to Emily report on the final completion of the Lu's, now renamed Shin Group, restructuring. The distressed assets have been divested, core businesses integrated smoothly, the new management team has fully taken over, and operations are back on track. This quarter's financial report shows a 230% increase in profitability compared to before the restructuring. Emily's tone carried a hint of pride. Furthermore, the new energy vehicle industrial park project we spearheaded has officially signed with the city government, with construction expected to begin next year, becoming a new growth engine for the group. I nodded, not surprised by the outcome. With a professional team, ample funding, and a clear strategy, success was a natural progression. A giant vessel once riddled with holes, had not only been successfully salvaged but was now sailing towards broader horizons. And what about the Lu's? I picked up my cup of black tea, took a delicate sip, and asked casually. Lu and his wife sold off all their remaining assets, including the old family residence where they last lived. They reportedly moved to a small city in the south to rely on distant relatives. Their exact situation is unknown, but it's certainly far worse than before. Emily's tone was calm, as if stating a fact unrelated to herself. As for Lu, she paused, glancing at her tablet. 3 months ago, someone saw him working odd jobs at a labor market in the city's West End, moving cement. Later, his body couldn't handle the strain, he got into a conflict with a foreman, and was injured. After that, he completely disappeared. Rumor has it he went to the border with a group of unidentified individuals, but the specifics are unverified. Disappeared? I set down my teacup, my gaze drifting to the vibrant blue sky outside the window. The Lu family's eldest son, once arrogant and contemptuous of others, had ultimately disappeared without a trace, his fate unknown. Was this perhaps another form of karma? I felt no particular satisfaction, nor the slightest pity. It was like casually dusting off an old object, nothing more. He, and the past he represented, had been completely closed off from my life. Not even a ripple remained. Understood, I said blandly. No need to follow up on his news going forward. Yes, Ms. Shen. After left, quiet returned to the office. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the bustling, vibrant city below. It had witnessed my downfall and my endurance, and it had also witnessed my return and my rise. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Gu. It was a photo of the evening glow outside his studio window, vibrant as fire. The caption read, "Saw a beautiful sunset today. Remembered you said you liked the city from this angle last time. Want to see it next time?" Looking at the simple yet thoughtful message, The corners of my lips curved upward involuntarily. Over the past half year, Gu and I had maintained a comfortable and understanding connection. Occasionally, we'd visit exhibitions, go horseback riding, or simply share little joys in life like this. He was never pushy, always maintaining a respectful distance that felt just right, making me feel completely at ease. Perhaps a healthy relationship should always be this way. Equal, independent, mutually appreciative, and growing together. I replied with a yes, accompanied by a smiley face emoji. Putting my phone down, I took a deep breath. The shadows of the past had completely dispersed, and the canvas of the future was slowly unfolding before me. I had the capability and the means to protect what I wanted to protect, to create what I wanted to create, and to love the person I wanted to love. I was no longer Shen, who had to hide her identity and compromise herself in love, nor was I CEO Shen, who was consumed solely by revenge, her eyes blinded by hatred. I was Shen, the heir to KS Capital, a trailblazer in the business world, and an ordinary woman with an independent spirit, pursuing self-actualization. My immense wealth gave me the freedom and confidence to choose. But what ultimately defined me wasn't the numbers on a bank card, but the path I'd walked, the choices I'd made, and the convictions I held in my heart. As night deepened, the city lights flickered on one by one, like stars scattered across the earth. I picked up my coat and handbag and walked out of the office. The elevator took me straight to the underground garage, where my driver was already waiting. Ms. Shen, back to the apartment, or? The driver asked respectfully. I looked at the vibrant lights of the city at night through the car window and smiled faintly. To wind. Tonight. I want to feel the speed of the wind again.